how's it going, guys? It is Fox98 here. Welcome back to another episode of the F1 debate. For you guys today here on the channel, today we're covering race number 2 of this triple header. It was the Mexican Grand Prix a few days ago, and we're going to cover it right here on the channel. If you want to join today's video, drop it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're around here as well, and let's get talking about the Mexican Grand Prix, because trust me, it's not really going to take us that long, because specifically, it was boring. Again. So let's crack on with it then. As per every single episode that we ever do of these, if there's anything that you want to mention in the comment section down below about anything to happen this race weekend, or just anything in general F1 related, chuck them in the comments. That's what they're there for. Have some fun and put in whatever you fancy. So we start things off with qualifying then, and to be honest, qualifying was the greatest part of the whole weekend. But first things first, it was actually nice to just have a normal weekend for once. And I mean normal as in like a non-sprint format weekend, because I hate sprint weekends so much that having them back-to-back was very, very painful. Just having a plain normal weekend, FP1, FP2, FP3, and then qualifying the race was just so satisfying to just have. I really just was glad to have some normality back on that front, which I didn't think I'd be saying, but hey, I'm a massive hater of sprint formats. I always will be. You're not going to change my opinion on that one. And it was just great to have a normal normal Formula 1 weekend in that front. But the qualifying was, interestingly enough, probably one of the weirdest qualifying sessions that was just fully dry that I've ever seen. And it was like, because Red Bull is so dominant this season, I was genuinely expecting Verstappen to just take pole by a good chunk of time and then have everybody else sort of in and around. But it was almost like in each session, a different team found the correct working window for their car. It was like in Q1, you know, it was, well, Q1 was just a bit mixed. It normally is. It's always quite chaotic. And then into Q2, all of a sudden, Mercedes turned up out of nowhere. And then Q3, Ferrari just turned up out of nowhere and stuck it on a front row lockout, which basically just gave me complete, just instant flashback to 2021, when Mercedes were nowhere near the pace of Red Bull and then just stuck front row lockout. And funnily enough, they did the exact same thing in the Grand Prix as what Ferrari did, which was allow Max Verstappen to lead into turn 1 and he just went on to win. So yeah, that basically just killed off all of that in the end of it. But it was a very similar format, and it was just like there was so many different teams and drivers either excelling or being woeful, that it was just bonkers, and it was a complete shock to the whole system. I personally thought that Ferrari would suffer massively around this circuit because they did last year, and it was not because they were just poor, but it was because their engine was really struggling in the high altitude, and I thought it'd be the same thing here, but I was wrong. They really did perform well, and credit to them. Heading into the Grand Prix itself, though, that's obviously when things went a bit sour, because Mr. Homeman favourite Sergio Perez opted to do a Lewis Hamilton in Qatar and just turn in on everyone in turn 1 and crash himself out of the Grand Prix. So, well done, Sergio Perez. You did a very great job. The first stint was kind of irrelevant, really. Nothing really happened. Everyone was just managing the car, managing the tyres, managing the brakes, managing the engine, managing the cooling, managing their feet, managing their diary for next week, managing their Christmas, their Halloween, their New Year, everything basically in the book. Okay, as I'm in the middle of rambling on in my conversation, I turn over to my preview screen of my recording and I just completely stopped functioning and everything was gone. So I don't know where I crashed to, so this might look a little bit weird in the edit, but it is what it is. So I'll just go back to the start. Obviously, Perez crashing out of his home Grand Prix. He did a Lewis Hamilton in Qatar. I mean, Hamilton actually said that in the cool-down room in the end of the race. It was clumsy from Sergio Perez. He didn't need to do that. I mean, he already had a fantastic start. He grabbed the slipstream. He's on the outside line. He can brake. The thing with Perez is that in that situation, while you're on the outside line, you can brake as late as you want in towards turn 1 because you've got such a great angle of attack compared to everybody else on the line. And you'll see it on the replays. I'll show it in the incident section of this F1 debate later on. He had so much margin of room to use, and he basically just took the racing line, because the ingrooved black line where everybody's been taking into turn 1, he just took that and didn't give Leclerc or Verstappen any knowledge of space. And I know a lot of people will be thinking, yeah, but he probably didn't know like the likes of Verstappen and stuff was alongside, but he grabbed a slipstream off of Leclerc and Verstappen and saw Max go to the right. So he would have known straight away that he was getting himself into a 3-wide situation. So, yeah, just a lack of awareness, a lack of confidence, and a guy that just yeah, he's just lost it now completely. Like, there's losing it and there's lost it, and Perez has just lost it now. He doesn't have anything left in his locker to really unlock. You know, we know he's a quick driver, but he's just not it anymore. And he needs to be replaced 100% in that Red Bull car. Who do I think should replace him? Honestly, I'd put Fernando Alonso in that car. I would. I'd just get him out of Aston Martin, because I'll talk about them in a minute, but they're not exactly showing any signs of getting any closer to the front of the field. In fact, they're getting closer towards F2 than anything else. But Fernando Alonso would easily rattle Max Verstappen to the point where he would push Verstappen to a new level that he's not unlocked before. And it might be that Verstappen has to fail to beat Alonso in a Drivers' Championship to learn that. But I just get Alonso out of there. You know, if you want to get a 1-2 in the Championship, which you're so desperate for, get Alonso in there. Bring some experience and bring Max a proper fight. Because no matter what car Alonso's got, as long as it's good, you work with it. And I'd love to see Alonso go against Max, because I'd actually cheer for Red Bull and I'd cheer for Alonso. That's just me, though. But yeah, I think Sergio Perez needs to be replaced. I know there's constant arguments and debates about bringing Daniel Ricciardo from AlphaTauri into Red Bull. I don't think Ricciardo should be promoted to Red Bull for 2024. That's my personal opinion. Why do I think that? It all comes back down to the whole one great race, one great big decision made incorrectly. You know, Nick De Vries had an outstanding Italian Grand Prix in 2022 last season, and then Red Bull snatched him up into the AlphaTauri program, and we all saw how that went. Now, I have my own thoughts and opinions on Nick De Vries being removed from AlphaTauri, and I thought it was really, really harsh at the time. But despite that, this goes back to Daniel Ricciardo's thing. I mean, the first race that he rejoined back into Formula 1 at the Hungarian Grand Prix, he was very, very good. You know, he did a very good job and a great race. At the Belgian Grand Prix, he was pretty poor it was mixed, actually. His sprint was good, his main race was poor. So it was a bit of a 50-50. And of course, in Zandvoort, then he makes the mistake and crashes into the wall and breaks his hand. And then he comes back, has a rusty US Grand Prix, and then has a great Mexican Grand Prix. So right now, theoretically, looking at Daniel Ricciardo since he's returned to Formula 1, he's had 2 good races and 2 bad races. Is that really enough to warrant somebody going into the Red Bull? For me, no. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo's got a seat for 2024. He's been contracted to race for AlphaTauri for the full season, and I think he needs that. I think what Ricciardo needs is for him to be able to build this team and build a car that can work around him and can unlock the true potential of Ricciardo and show his team leader expertise in that circumstance, and give AlphaTauri a platform that when eventually he does move on from AlphaTauri, to allow the next group of drivers to take that team and push it upwards. Obviously, the main reason for me why AlphaTauri are, you know, at the bottom of the champion, well, they're not at the bottom of the championship anymore, but they're right down that area of the championship, is because they just don't have anybody elite in terms of experience that races for that team. Of course, it is a team designed for junior drivers and to bring the Red Bull junior drivers a step into Formula 1 and then obviously promote them further. My issue with that is you do that. You've got nobody in the experience to really guide that team and really push it in a good direction. You know, every single team right now, you're Hamilton and Mercedes, you're Verstappen and Red Bull, you're Leclerc and Ferrari, you're Norris and McLaren, you're Alonso and Aston Martin. They are so world class, and they've got such great experience ranging from C's to, you know, to length of career, that they're able to not only just drive the car really well, but they're also able to be a key asset on what's needed to develop a car further. When it comes to AlphaTauri, when you're bringing in constant juniors all the time, which, you know, it's fair enough, that's the stepping point of the team, but they're never going to be successful. And you need to balance success, because you need to have, obviously, the prize money coming in to keep that investment rolling, versus not having that. And that's where I feel like Ricciardo staying at AlphaTauri for one more year is completely valid, because, like I said, he's not had enough time for me personally to prove that he should be in that car. I mean, granted, yes, he did outqualify Sergio Perez in Mexico, but I think Perez was only like a tenth and a bit off of Verstappen, so Ricciardo was in that mix. The AlphaTauri as well had significantly less cooling louvres, or louvres, however they call it, compared to other teams, and the AlphaTauri just worked brilliantly around there, and because it's such a short lap as well, obviously closes the field a lot closer together. And we've seen that the pack is close, you know, bar Red Bull, well, bar Verstappen. The pack is very close. So that was to be expected. Don't get me wrong, he definitely gave a little bit more out of the car compared to like Tsunoda. But I do genuinely feel like Ricciardo has had, for me, one outstanding Grand Prix. Unless Red Bull want to fall down that trap that they did with De Vries, crack on. But I just don't think it's the right way to go, in my personal opinion. I would just for the vibes, just get Fernando Alonso and just get him into Red Bull. I think it'd be hilarious, and I'd love it. But we'll move away from that. So, in terms of the race itself, it was very, very boring. I really didn't enjoy the Grand Prix at all. I don't know what to say, man. Mexico is such a rubbish race every single year. I'm sorry to say it. I know, you know, there's probably... I doubt there's anybody that's from Mexico that watch these videos, but you never know. The atmosphere is always a 10 out of 10. It is so good. Like, the vibes that the fans bring for the races, the DJ and the crowd cheer. All right, granted, Checo is a big, big reason for that. They're always off their feet because he's there. But the racing, since we've returned there... When did we return there? I think it was 2015, I think we returned to Mexico. I can't remember if they raced there in 2014 or not. I don't think they did. I think it was 2015 onwards that we returned to Mexico. Every single race has just been rubbish. If you can genuinely think of again, this is where the comment section comes into it, and I'm not going to argue against you if you genuinely feel that way. But let me know in the comments section down below, is there genuinely a Mexican Grand Prix that you've actually really enjoyed? Because I can't see it. All of them are just poor. Like, because of the high altitude, they have to do such extreme levels of cooling on their car, which obviously they're going to do less of because it affects their performance. So they're constantly managing the temperatures, they're managing their tyres, they're managing their brakes, they're managing just everything. And it's just such a pedestrian Grand Prix. The high altitude obviously having less drag means that the DRS effect, even on that super long straight, is completely useless. Everybody's pulling out of the slipstream to try and cool their cars down. No one really wants to race, basically. They all just want to get from A to B. It's like instead of me racing a Formula 1 car around a track, it's like example of me getting my Formula 1 car and taking it to work with me. You know, I'm just getting from A to B. I'm not racing to get there. I just need to, you know, just gently manage myself and just pace it a little bit to get there, you know? And that's just crap. And it comes, you know, you look at Lewis Hamilton and don't get me wrong, he had an outstanding final stint on those medium compound tyres. By the way, if you're a Ferrari fan, his medium tyres haven't fallen off yet. We're still waiting for that. I love that. Mercedes admin put it out like yesterday, I think it was, saying that they were still waiting for his mediums to fall off. Sorry, I just had to put that out there. But he was, obviously, you know, he's on 38 lap old medium tyres, and then all of a sudden he just, on the last lap, just bolts in a fastest lap. And it was, oh yeah, we'll give you all the engine modes because we don't need them and temperature's not an issue. Which just goes to show that while there is obviously the engine mode ban within Formula 1 where you can't increase and decrease engine modes, obviously you can go to a maximum engine mode, let's just, I don't know, say maximum engine mode of 4, but all of the teams were dropping their engine modes down to the lowest that they could be, specifically for coolant and managing and everything like that, and temperatures. And then obviously, well, we saw when they actually were allowed to go to basically the maximum that they were allowed, because that's what they set their engine to go at maximum, that's where they were at. And it's just like, why? I don't get it. Like, why is it that we have to watch a Grand Prix where a guy on 38 lap old mediums can just set the fastest lap on the last lap because of no temperature issues or anything like that? It's just boring. The wheel-to-wheel racing's never that entertaining, and it just doesn't fill me with any excitement. You know, for me, this is my personal opinion, Mexico, Miami, and Monaco are the worst 3 races on the calendar. This season, Miami, I genuinely can't remember anything from Miami apart from Verstappen overtaking everybody because he was in a dominant Red Bull versus Perez, who bottled pole position when Verstappen started 15th in that race. All I can remember is Verstappen charging through the field and winning. I literally remember nothing else from that Grand Prix. It was that boring. Monaco was, again, an absolute snooze fest and always is, until obviously the rain came and it actually saved it a little bit, but it was still completely dead beyond that point. And then Mexico. But like 2015, I genuinely can't remember anything. 2016, I'm pretty sure Hamilton won. 2015, Rosberg won it, but I can't remember anything else towards that. 2016, Hamilton won it. That was a little bit dramatic in that one because Hamilton cut turn 1 and got away with it, and then Verstappen, Vettel, and Ricciardo had a bit of a fighting battle between each other all in that one. 2017, there was contact between Vettel and Hamilton, so they were making their way up the order. But the battle for the lead was completely pointless. I think Max won. 2018, again, it was just heavy management. Max won. Ricciardo had an engine failure. Nothing else happened. 2019, the Ferraris locked out the front row. There was contact between Verstappen and Bottas. So then Verstappen basically was out of the running. And then Mercedes did a brilliant one-stop strategy with Hamilton. Shock, he did another great strategy at Mexico, won the Grand Prix. But nothing else happened. 2022, we never went there. 21, Max beat Hamilton off the line and Bottas. Won the race. Nothing else happened. Oh yeah, Bottas spun, didn't he? 22, what happened in 22 last year? Verstappen, again, led and won. Nothing else happened. The Mercedes were comfortable behind. I think Hamilton was suffering with a fight with Perez, but kept him at bay. And the same thing here. Nothing happened. The characteristics of the circuit just do not work. They're just really, really poor. They don't work. And either the layout has to change, or you just got to get rid of the track, because there's such great tracks out there that don't get a sniff on our calendar and our schedule. Like, you know, I'd love to I'd love to see a Formula race in Kailani. I'd love to go back to Sepang. Sepang's a bloody brilliant circuit. I'd do Malaysia at night, personally. It hasn't produced two great races, to be honest, but I miss Portugal. I think Portugal's a brilliant race circuit. Germany, we don't go to the Nürburgring, we don't go to Hockenheim. Why not? I love those two circuits. You know, there's so many great circuits out there that we just miss. And yeah, like I said, I take nothing away from the atmosphere from that. Although, apart from that fan that was involved in a fight between them and I think a Tifosi member in the stadium section because Perez and Leclerc crashed into each other. I mean, I'm glad the guy got a life ban. If I was a Ferrari fan and I was being attacked like that, I'd be doing the same thing. I'd beat the hell out of him. Like, why do you need to fight? I don't get it. Like, we ain't football. You know, it happens. It's an incident. Unless, though, you know, obviously we don't know the full story about it. There was taunting or anything like that. But yeah, I really didn't like that scenes at all. It was very grim, very, very poor. Same with Leclerc on the podium, you know, doing his speech and all the fans booing. I understand it. Obviously, Leclerc's basically the villain here because he's taken out Sergio Perez. But at the end of the day, Perez took himself out. So realistically, the crowd realistically should just boo Perez for putting on a poor performance for them. But hey-ho. Again, I really didn't like that. I don't like it when crowds boo at drivers, man. Like we saw with Grosjean in 2020. We've seen with the Dutch driver that was killed in Spa earlier this year. These racing drivers, they get paid money for racing at these circuits. You come to watch them, and every time they put on a show for you, they put their lives on the line. You know, one freak crash can kill them, and they know that, and you need to know that as well. So don't ever boo a driver if they're, you know, going around, because, you know, they're entertaining you, and they're the ones putting their lives on the line, not you. So don't do it. But yeah, the race was just uneventful, really. So yeah, it is what it is. Verstappen obviously won. Hamilton, great race from him. So we'll quickly go through the field then. Let's go through all 10 teams, see how they got along. And then we'll go through the incidents that happened during the race in our little review. And then we'll predict the Brazilian Grand Prix, which is happening this weekend, which I am so excited for because Interlagos is amazing. Now, first things first, Red Bull, let's start with them. Verstappen, absolutely dominant, got a brilliant start as he did in 2021. Got in between the two Ferraris, led into the first corner, and just dominated proceedings. It was a bit close between him and Leclerc in the first stint, but eventually then, especially the second stint after the red flag, my God, that guy was gone. It was just like, bye, see you later, I'm off. You know, Hamilton had his medium compound tyres. I had a little bit of a inkling in me. I'm like, yes, go on, Lewis, my goat. And then Max was just like, nah, don't wanna, bye. And just checked out front. Another classic performance from Verstappen. Perez really just crashed himself out of the race. It is what it is, isn't it? Mercedes, wow. Well done to Lewis Hamilton. For me, Verstappen, Hamilton and Norris, I'll come on to McLaren and Norris in a minute. Verstappen, Hamilton and Norris were in a different level compared to everybody else today. Obviously, the gap between like Verstappen and Hamilton, I get it, was like 10 seconds at the end. But in terms of driving level, you know, if Hamilton, for example, was performing at the level that he did in that Mexican Grand Prix in a car that was equal to Verstappen's, then, you know, they'd be having a great fight between each other. Same with Norris, but obviously there's different levels to them. So that's kind of where it comes into about there. But yeah, Hamilton was outstanding in that Grand Prix. He put in, it was not the greatest start from Hamilton. He had, well, I say that, he did have a good first start. However, when it came to the turn one, obviously he got sort of involved in a mix with Sergio Perez. So he dropped behind Ricciardo, took a bit of time before he could get past Ricciardo, but he stuck in there very nicely, got past him, jumped Sainz in the pit stops, jumped Leclerc, no, didn't jump Leclerc, actually overtook Leclerc after the red flag came out a few laps later. But the thing with Hamilton is that whenever he was in the slipstream or DRS of another car, he seemed to just not have any management problems. Like, there was a lot of drivers that had to drop back a little bit and then come back in and forth and so on and so what. Lewis was just up there and just pushing. And that overtake on Leclerc was outstanding. That was the definition for me. That overtake was the definition of, if you no longer go for a gap, you're no longer a racing driver. Probably one of the best quotes in Formula One by the greatest of all time, Ayrton Senna. That was the definition. That was right on the limit of going onto the grass. And it was fair defended from Leclerc. He gave him the car's width. And Hamilton was just like, do you know what? No, I'm not going to go to the outside and try and outbrake you. There is a gap there. I'm going for it. And he went for it, and it was fantastic. And as I tried to make the little joke earlier, well, his medium tyres haven't exactly fallen off yet. He did a brilliant job managing those mediums compared to the Ferraris on the hards. For George Russell, though, it was a very, very poor race for Russell. There's a little bit of sympathy that you can have with Russell. He didn't do FP1, so he only had 2 sessions compared to everybody else having more. Of course, having to do the junior driver coming in. So Russell missed out on FP1. So maybe if he had FP1, he maybe could have done a little bit more setup work to try and find a good balance. But even when he was behind the other cars like Hamilton was, he couldn't pass them. And that was the biggest problem. He just wasn't quick enough to pass the cars in front. And then when he backed off because he needed to get his tyre temperatures back, his engine temps and everything back under control, he then made his tyres too cold. So then, he lost it and just had a bad race, really, for Russell's perspective. Ferrari, it was a good race for them, actually. It was much better than I thought that they would do. Leclerc, once again, went into absolute insanity mode when he had damage to his front wing end plate. The amount of times that man's had damage and just been flying afterwards. Like Silverstone 22, he was rapid with a broken front wing end plate. Here, he was rapid with a broken front wing end plate. I think Ferrari in future just need to break Leclerc's front wing end plates because he just doesn't need them. He's quick enough without them. Just don't bother with them. He'd be fine because he blitzed Sainz without them. But it was, they didn't really do much in the Grand Prix. They weren't as quick as Hamilton. I don't think they were as quick as Norris, but Norris had his own issues. But they were solid. They were much better than what I thought they were. McLaren were fantastic in the race. I thought Oscar Piastri was all right. He wasn't, absolutely rapid. I don't think he beat Daniel Ricciardo in the Grand Prix. So when I say fantastic, I'm basically talking about Lando Norris. For me, that was his best Formula 1 race that he's had so far because of his own mistakes. Obviously, in qualifying, he just got it completely wrong. Didn't do a lap on the medium. I don't know why. Then he messed up his soft tyre run, so he starts last. Builds his way back up, it's actually quite a clever stint, because I saw him go onto the softs, and I'm like, why are you doing that? But because he's going to be in so much traffic with all this management going on, obviously pit the softs, go as far up the order as you can get, box for hards, get massive amounts of clean air for ages and ages and ages, full temperature control, and then after the red flag, he made the mistake. It was a case of what could have, really. He probably would have overtaken Carlos Sainz, but he made a massive error at the start on the restart for the race, but blitzed his way up the field, got past everybody, Ricciardo, Piastri, Russell, all of them, and just, definitely for me, had his best race in his Formula 1 career so far. Really, really brilliant overtaking, fantastic race pace. Probably could have got a podium had he not made any errors. Would he have challenged Max? No, I don't think anyone could have challenged Max. I think it would have been close between him and Hamilton, but, again, it was a case of what if for Lando Norris, really. Aston Martin, wow. I don't know where to start with Aston Martin. I really don't. I personally can't remember a Formula 1 team that has started so well in a season and dropped off so substantially compared to any other team I've ever seen. From a team that I said at the start of the season were the best chance of beating Red Bull to a race victory, to a team that I can't see getting out of Q1 on a regular basis now is genuinely, I can't believe it. Like, their car concept looks so similar to Red Bull. And I say so similar. Their car concept is so clean in terms of they don't really, it's a car that doesn't look like it needs drastic changes. Like we've seen like Mercedes, Ferrari, Haas, for example, those AlphaTauri to an extent, change their concepts quite heavily, like with massive side pod changes that look completely different. Aston haven't done that because to me it looks like their initial car concept was perfect and they've just completely gone off the cliff, and I've got no idea why. I can't put my finger into it. And what's more worrying is that not only are they on a rapid decline now, but for 2024, their development is already significantly hampered because Alonso was obviously in Qatar, they ran just as they did in Qatar. In the US Grand Prix, Alonso ran the Qatar spec floor. Alonso ran the Qatar spec floor. Stroll ran the Austin spec floor, the new one that they brought. Then heading into Mexico, they were nowhere. Then Stroll runs with the Qatar spec floor, but the Austin spec diffuser. They don't know what they've they have no idea what's wrong with that car. And it's very worrying for 2024 because if you can't fix it and you can't find out the correlations between what's making it go quick and what's making it go slow, your development direction for 2024 is going to be really, really poor. Take teams like McLaren. Well, they know which concept they can go down for 2024. Like Mercedes, they brought a brand new floor in Austin and it's really working well for them to the point where 2 races in a row now, they've had better race pace than McLaren. And of course, Mercedes have got massive conceptual changes to make in 2024. But by having such an impressive floor shows a direction that they can use for 2024. Ferrari, they brought a new floor in Suzuka. That floor worked well, so they can use elements of that floor to push them in 2024. Aston can't use any of that because they're constantly flipping and flopping changes and they don't know what's wrong. So yeah, it's worrying times for Aston Martin, and well, I guess we'll see if they get their fingers crossed and if they can fix it or not. Alpine. Now, I forgot Alpine last time I did the F1 debate, so sorry about that. Just a standard race really from them. They weren't really that impressive. Took them ages to get past Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. They're just not... I can't take Alpine seriously. I can't. They're just not a team to me. You know, they've got group ownership now of the likes of Trent, Anthony Joshua, Rory McIlroy all co-owning that team and taking a stake in it. Like, what, to me, it just, I don't know, Alpine's just such a mess. I don't rate Ocon and Gasly. I don't think they're anywhere good enough to do anything with that team. They're just in a massive mess, and I don't really know. I can see them just basically forever being a midfield team for eternity. I don't see them ever pushing towards the front of the grid anytime soon. They had their chance really in 2020 when they had quite a good structure with the likes of Ricciardo, Ocon, Cyril Abiteboul. They had quite a bit of a bullish, system in place. Now they don't. Now they got Ocon, Gasly, Otmar Safnauer, and multi takeovers with, like I said, all these sporting people. Yeah, it's not happening for them. It's just not happening for them. Haas, a bit of a rough weekend for Haas. Hülkenberg really desperately tried his hardest to stay in front of the field behind him, but he couldn't obviously do it in the end, which was a shame. Magnussen, of course, with a suspension failure. That was a bit of a shame for him. It was quite scary as well to have it fail in that high-speed corner. Luckily, he was able to get out of the car okay and was absolutely fine. That Haas, though, is rapid in a straight line, so they seem to have just given themselves straight line speed and nothing else. But again, that's what happens when we make big concept changes. It's hard to judge Haas, and I think Haas will need to use the rest of the season to really judge it because they had a sprint weekend which didn't allow them to get the setup right for that Haas. Then they've got a car that they've got in extreme circumstances, aka Mexico with super high altitude, so that really doesn't allow you to do much with it. So come Brazil, Vegas and Abu Dhabi, they'll really hopefully be able to learn more about what their car is and how to bring it forwards, moving obviously forwards. Nothing really happened with Alfa Romeo, sorry. They just had quite a quiet weekend. I thought Bottas was going to get a point at some point. He looked quite quick, actually, throughout the weekend. And I'll flip these two together because Bottas and Albon looked super quick throughout the course of the weekend. Albon, I thought, was going to get in the top 5 with the way that he was performing in FP2 and FP3. But it was obviously just a dose of, well, false expectation because they both didn't really perform that well. Obviously, Bottas made the contact with Lance Stroll at the end. Albon I didn't really remember much from Albon. To be honest, it's hard for me to remember with such a boring race, but hey ho. There was a bit of that in between. So yeah, both those teams, they started well and then just fell down the order. And then AlphaTauri, wow, fair play to them. They were brilliant this weekend. Daniel Ricciardo, by far his strongest race of the season. Tsunoda, big issues if he can't score the points. He was obviously desperate to try and get past Oscar Piastri, and he also did a Lewis Hamilton, but this time in Monza, by just going, into the to basically turning in on Piastri, and it didn't work out. And if Tsunoda was able to actually, be patient a bit more, he would have probably been overtaken by Lando Norris, but he would have stayed effectively where he was. It would have been crucial points that AlphaTauri have lost, and hopefully they don't regret that later on. But yeah, bad race for Yuki Tsunoda. And I think, unless I've forgotten yet another team, I've gone through everybody. But if I have, then oh well. What we're going to do now is we're going to go over to my editing software. We're going to have a look at some of the incidents that happened throughout the race, give my thoughts and opinions on them, and then we're going to predict the Brazilian Grand Prix. Okay, so you join me at analysing the two incidents, really, that I wanted to pick out for this F1 debate. So let's have a look at them then. So the first one is obviously the start, and we're going to be looking at Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc, heading down in towards first corner. So the biggest issue that we've got here is that because Perez got such a great start, he knows that Verstappen's also had a good start because he's gone basically effectively past Carlos Sainz and he's now side by side with Leclerc. Sergio Perez here has gone to the outside line. Now Perez has got the dream place to go around the outside in turn one. So first things first here. Now while in this specific clip here that Sergio Perez is slightly behind Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, Perez has obviously just pulled out of a double slipstream, which is going to give him so much more straight line speed, to the point that if we speed it up to where we get towards the first corner with all of these drivers, which is, let's get behind a tree line, that's a bit pretty poor there, right? You can now see that the front of Perez's wing, very hard to see, is effectively level, if not fractionally ahead of Max Verstappen's front tip of his front wing as well. The difference that Perez has got is that he's got the outside line to really swing it round in towards turn one. Now, while I'm still using my hands as movement, you can't see that. So I will use my mouse. He can swing that car right around the outside, whereas Max here is going to have such a tight line. So when we get to the first corner right about now, where they're all braking effectively at the same point here, notice here, so Verstappen has effectively moved himself across. He wants to get as much of basically as much of an angle as he can less to get in towards the first corner. No matter what here, he's going to be going into turn one at a very tight angle, and he's going to have two of the drivers behind him. Now, the difference with Verstappen is that unless he was looking in his mirror, he's going to struggle to notice if Sergio Perez is actually on his outside or not. It's going to be very hard for him to see that. They'll be constantly looking left and right into each other's mirrors, but he might not know that Perez is there, but he knows that Leclerc is here. Leclerc is in the middle of a sandwich here, so he can't do anything. He can't push Max wide, and he can't push over there. He's just got to stay where he is. He either does that, or he brakes and completely backs out of it. The difference with Charles Leclerc here is that, realistically, he's a racing driver. It's the first lap, and he started on pole position. He's not just going to back out and let two drivers just breeze past in front of him. He'll hold the position. Going into the first corner now, when I talk about the black line and the black groove, now just as they make contact here, look at this black groove. Now this is where obviously they are all taking as their racing line to swoop into the first corner. Sergio Perez is literally given zero space here for Charles Leclerc. He's turning in on Leclerc. Perez has got so much more tarmac that he can utilise, and while they've had obviously FP1, 2 and 3 qualifying at this point, this outside line here, it's not really going to be that heavily dirty. It won't be terrible for them. And if he did that then, as they make their contact here, like the amount of space then that he could do. Now, what helps Verstappen in this circumstance is if we go into the corner, they've now made contact here. You can see, look, that Leclerc is trying not to hit Verstappen, but Perez has completely cut his line. Now with Verstappen, as we go in towards turn one, I'm going to try and make sure that I get it at the right points here. Now obviously he would have seen the collision going into, by looking into his mirror ever so slightly in that specific point. He would have noticed that there was a collision. The thing with Verstappen is, while Verstappen, no matter what, out of all those drivers, is going to take the apex of turn one, he will, by the time Perez brakes later, Perez can brake late, swing right round here, and then as they come to that entrance point, as Verstappen then basically drifts himself that way, not only is Verstappen going to have to take a tight apex for turn 1, he's then going to have to take a sacrifice for the entry into turn 2 because Perez can swoop around the outside, get his front, basically his car in front of Verstappen's, force Verstappen wide to then open up his line into turn 2. Verstappen will now be on the outside. Perez can then pinch Max on the inside of turn 3, take the exit out of turn 3, and then take the lead of the Grand Prix. But Perez has gone for Sergio Perez's move and crashed himself out of the Grand Prix. Looking on board here with Charles Leclerc now. So Leclerc here, he's in a Red Bull sandwich. Verstappen's had the slipstream. Perez has had the slipstream. They're all braking roughly at the same point here. All of them are. Now, as we go into the first corner, you can see that Leclerc does actually brake fractionally later than Max Verstappen heading into the first corner. Hence why Charles Leclerc's car is in front. Now, what Charles Leclerc is trying to do here is he's trying to do a little bit of a trail brake. So by that, he's braked a little bit later, but then he's going to let the car basically float out a bit. He knows that he can't brake late and then take the apex. He can't brake early, take the apex into the corner. He can't brake super late and swoop around the outside of turn 1 because Perez is on his left-hand side. All Charles Leclerc can do here is brake a little bit later and just trail brake it in. Get it a little bit wide, you just have to be more gentle with it. Gentle with the steering, gentle with everything. And Leclerc's done that quite well, actually. So as they go into the first corner, you can see that at this point now, as they make their contact, Sergio Perez has just completely closed Charles Leclerc off. Leclerc's angle of attack into this apex right now is just a Red Bull sandwich. There is nowhere for Leclerc to go. If Perez gives Leclerc the space, Perez can swoop around the outside. Because if you look here, right, this is the key point of it. Now, while Perez, yes, he turns in on Charles Leclerc. Granted, I get you that. But just watch that left-hand side. As Perez comes through and starts turning, because he's got such a much less of an angle going into turn 1 compared to Leclerc and Verstappen, who've really got to put an extra bit of turning angle and degree into their corner, Perez doesn't have to do that. If he just gives Leclerc the space and swoops down the outside, well, I mean, look, I know he's closed him off, but he's granted himself half a car length in front. But that's just by taking the outside line. If he gave Leclerc the space, because then by giving Leclerc the space, yes, he's going to be a bit wider, but guess what? The degree of his cornering is going to be less, so he can carry a bit more speed into turn 1, and he'll probably be forcing either Verstappen or Leclerc to back out of it. But Perez was just not having it, and he's trying to take the racing line. He's not respecting any of the two drivers alongside of him, and it's just pure desperation to impress because he had a good start in front of his home crowd. And shock of the horrors, there is your crash, and there is Sergio Perez going into Rocket League. That's also a nice still right there, and you can see how much damage was caused from the side pod of that. So even if you replace the side pod, which they tried to do for Sergio Perez to get him out of the race, that floor after that collision, plus the engine and the gearbox in that car, yeah, no, that was never going anywhere. And then it ended up like that. And again, I mean, you can see it again. I mean, look at the damage that was, yeah, it's a write-off at that point. So yeah, for Sergio Perez, it is a crash. The only other incident then is obviously the one that I talked about earlier, which was Tsunoda basically doing a Hamilton on Oscar Piastri in Monza, apart from Tsunoda was doing it here. It's the same thing, effectively, as they go in towards the start-finish straight here. They're heading in towards turn 1. Tsunoda's outbraked Oscar Piastri, and again, Tsunoda, lo and behold, look where the, my play button is in the way, but look where the black groove is for the racing line heading into the first corner. It's right there, and Tsunoda's just going for it. There's so much more tarmac to do here. Tsunoda's already, at this point, going into the corner, he's already braked later than Piastri. If you look at them a couple of meters back, granted, Tsunoda's had the slipstream in the DRS, so he has pulled out at this point, but here they're level. Here, they're not level. All Tsunoda needs to do is just grant Piastri the space that he's warranted on that line. Don't turn in on Piastri. Go wider into turn 1. Okay, granted, it is lap 49 of 71, so there'll be a little bit more marbles offline. but you can still claim the position. So Piastri at this point actually has put himself in a position where he's allowing Tsunoda basically to go around the outside because he can't defend it. But Tsunoda's misjudged it completely, and then there's their contact, and then they spin around. Obviously lucky for Piastri that he's able to continue, but for Tsunoda, you can see here, look, so he's pulled out of the slipstream. He's braking a bit later than Piastri, but what Tsunoda's done here now, the difference is, as Tsunoda, let's go back, oh, that's when he was crying, right here now, so the issue that Tsunoda's got, because he's closed the DRS at this point because it wasn't open, he's pulled out of the slipstream of Piastri. Basically, where Tsunoda has gone horrifically wrong here, and it's the exact same thing, well, not quite the same as Hamilton's in Monza, it was a little bit different Hamilton's in Monza, but what Tsunoda's done here is that he's failed to anticipate, because he's seen Piastri breezing past, he's breezing past Piastri at this point, he effectively believes that as they get to this corner now, Piastri, he's basically gone, I've got this move done now. Piastri, I've breezed past. I can see him literally just fly there for that millisecond for a Formula 1 driver. I'm absolutely fine. He's not there anymore. I've overtaken him. Bash. And then Piastri's like, you haven't, mate. You've still got a bit more work to do on that. And then he spun him round. So, yeah, 100% Tsunoda's fault. I understand why they didn't give Tsunoda a penalty, because there is Tsunoda's penalty. He's screwed himself over. Piastri was able to continue. So, yeah, unfortunately, for two drivers that I feel are under pressure in Formula 1, Tsunoda and Perez, they haven't really done themselves much justice. Okay, so now that we've reviewed the incidents, what do I think is going to happen at the Brazilian Grand Prix? Well, obviously Red Bull will be favourites to win. It is another sprint weekend, but Brazil just brings up bangers left, right and centre. And the sprint format actually works there, so I don't mind it as much. I think Red Bull, obviously, they're going to be the team to beat. It'd be interesting to see how the likes of Mercedes do. Of course, last year, Mercedes picked up a 1-2 finish at that race. But of course, all the teams would have learned where they went well and wrong last year, so things could ebb and flow. Ferrari are always just a fluctuating team. I thought they were going to be poor in Mexico, but they weren't. So maybe here in Brazil, they'd actually be quite good, especially in Sector 3 and 1 with their straight line speed. McLaren will be quite competitive as per usual. It's pretty much now become Red Bull is the fastest, and then it's either who's going to be quicker out of Mercedes, McLaren and Ferrari. I think realistically, it's probably going to be, well, I say that, Mercedes were quick in qualifying last year and were quickest in the race, so it is what it is. We'll just have to wait and see. It's hard to predict. I think Red Bull, obviously, with Verstappen, will be the fastest, and yeah, I think really it's going to be very tight between those other three teams, but we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? If you have enjoyed this episode of the F1 Debate, though, feel free to drop it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here as well, and I will catch you guys for the next one very, very soon. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care all. Peace.